In the special edition of our series of Poets and Poetry by Indira, we bring you poems from Indian languages. Today, we have a poem in the Marathi language, of course, in its English translation. When one thinks of Marathi, naturally, we go to the state of Maharashtra, a big state on the western coast of India. Many hill station, and of course the film world. But I'm going to talk to you about Marathi language, which they say began as a combination of Sanskrit, Prakrit, Pali, and what we call the Deshi Bhashas of ancient India. Marathi as a literary language probably began somewhere in the 11th century. Isn't it interesting that the earliest inscription is in Shravana-Belgola, which is today in Karnataka, gives us an idea of how far the Maratha Empire existed once. Early literature is also found in Pandharpur. And we do have a long heritage of bhajans and songs in the Marathi language. When we look at literature, we talk about probably the latter half of the 12th century, when you have the Manubhavas writing in prose. Marathi language as we know it today probably began somewhere in the 14th and 15th centuries. Other names that come to mind are Eknath, Gyandev, Mukteshwar, Tukaram, Ramdas. I think the list can go on and on of devotional literature from this region of India called Maharashtra today. Vinda Karandkar. Actually, his full name is Govind Vinayak Karandkar, but known more popularly as Vinda. 1918 to 2010, he was a poet, a writer, a literary critic, translator, and essayist. He wrote works for children too, like Pariga Pari, Sasyasche, etc. There is an anthology called Samhita, and his works, some are Drupad, Jatak, etc. I believe he traveled all over Maharashtra reciting poetry. He won the Gyanpith Award in 2006 and a Sahitya Academy Fellowship in 1996. Dena Nanya Deit Jave, Gena Nanya Ghet Jave, Hiravya, Pevallavya, Mala Varuni, Hirvi Piyali Shal Dhyavi, and so on the poem goes. Difficult for me to read it in Marathi for you, but let me give you the English translation. The one who gives should continue giving, and the one who receives should continue receiving. That's how the poem begins. And the poem doesn't have a title, so we have taken the first line as the title. What does one get? What does one give? Accept a green shawl from the lush green farms. Take a shield for your chest from the mountain ranges of the Sahyadri. Take different shapes from the crazy clouds. For the burning questions, you may have to take answers from what the earth has to offer. Pilale vi ayal dhyavi, Barelia bhime kadun, Tuka bachi mal dhyavi. And therefore, the great Tukaram is mentioned here. From the wild sea, take the lion's mane. Sant Tukaram's devotion from the river Bhima when she is in spate. The one who gives you may keep giving, and the one who receives may keep receiving. But then we must also learn to take and to give at the same time. Notice when I was talking about it in English, quoting, I talked about the different natural objects of the region. And that's what the poet does here. He talks about the mountain ranges, the river, the rain clouds, etc., etc. But at the same time, the land is famous for its spirituality, and therefore Tukaram is mentioned. Can we interpret it a little deeper and say that the poet is talking about the 5 elements? You have the earth, the air, water, fire, and space. Combined together, they give the well-being of the human race. So maybe the poem is not about a human giver, but certainly the taker is a human being. We take from nature. But is there a little takeaway from this? Also learn to give back to nature. And that is why he says, the one who gives should continue giving, and one who receives should continue receiving. But remember that the two have to become one, because we must learn to give back to nature. A poem which seems simple, but I think a poem that sets you thinking. The entire poem can be seen as an extended metaphor, because the giving is not the physical giving that we are thinking of, not gifts, not money, but what nature gives us. So one notices that it is that which extends all through the poem. So from the mountains and the rivers, from the green land, from the ocean, from the sky, from the earth. So the entire poem has to be interpreted as that. The giver is earth. The receiver probably is the human being. So sometimes you can have, there is a word which we call the Homeric simile. This isn't a Homeric simile, but it's almost like that because it is an extended metaphor. I love nature poem in all its forms. Pure description of nature like the romantic poets in English. I also like poems about nature where there is levels of meaning. There is a hidden meaning maybe as there is in this poem. Yes, I read it in translation, but I love the sound of the Marathi language as I tried to read it in Marathi too. Well, it would be a wonderful idea if we could read poems in both the languages and see which one we could appreciate better.